Hey guys, Big Joe here, and as I'm sure you can imagine, over the course of this analysis series I have made a mistake. Or two. Or 7 pages worth. So this video and next week's video are here to go over all of the mistakes I have made throughout this series and correct them. But before I get into the mistakes I made in the analysis series, I'm first going to take a moment to go over the mistakes I made in the first impressions videos. Hey guys, Big Joe here. Welcome back to Takagi-san Season 2 First Impressions, Episode 3. Takagi-san First Impressions Episode 3 was the first Impressions video to have a title like this. However, as you can see, I incorrectly cut the title so that the words would show up as I said them. This problem persisted all the way up until Episode 9 until I finally made a new template. Next is dropping honorifics based on the manga's 81st chapter. If the second season gets a dub, I will be very interested to see how they translate this. They dub it just fine. I mean, about as well as they dub any other story. The showrunners are clearly not worried about adding original content to the anime adaptation. What I meant to say here is that they are not shy about adding original content. Also, having Habaguchi trying to open a can of coffee was a nice tie-in to the previous episode. Or it could just be what he was doing in the manga. You know, could be that. I wonder if the keychain will go on to be a pivotal item like the handkerchief was last season. No, it will not. Lastly, I noticed that the image with the ED has changed. And given that this is episode 5, it will likely do so again at least one more time. No, it will not. This is our first time hearing Ponytail Girl speak. Actually, we hear Sumiri speak all the way back in Season 1 when we first see her. If I recall, they were happy to see Takagi with another friend. To clarify, I am saying that the fan base was happy to see Takagi with a friend. As of now, I will be taking suggestions for stories to analyse. So back then, I thought the Season 2 analysis series would be similar to Season 1, in that I wouldn't analyse a story unless someone suggested it. But I realised that the most likely method to give me a full picture of the series was to analyse every story in one form or another, thus completely negating the need for suggestions. The first story we have is Achi Mithoi. This was supposed to be an intentional flub, like something you would see in a JXE video. I mean, it's not like I rip anything else off from JXE. But instead of sounding like an intentional flub, it sounds more like I just forgot to cut out a dud take. The one complaint I have with this adaptation is the way they made Takagi look sitting in class. What I loved about the manga chapter is that the only way we as an audience could tell something was wrong was that Nishikata thought so. Some of the shots in the adaptation though make it a little too obvious, and that kind of robs it of some of its significance. Actually, you can pretty easily tell that something is wrong in the manga as well. To assert that the manga made it more ambiguous is dishonest. So for those of you who missed the channel update, I now have a new audio setup. 1, this shot is very out of focus. 2, why are you so sweaty? There is a chance that this is the last episode of the series? No, it is not. When Takagi mistakes that angry-looking statue for Tanabe, I literally laughed out loud. Well, lesson learned. Never use the front-facing camera on an iPhone to film yourself. How he notices that Nishikata is carrying a Kinchaku. Don't talk about Kinchakus, don't talk about Kinchakus, don't talk about Kinchakus. For people who don't get why this was in the video, it was sort of supposed to be a joke. A reference to the room analysis where I spent an entire paragraph describing what a furin is. The joke is that explaining Japanese cultural references is something of a compulsion that I actively need to fight against. The fact that the fireworks end just as they meet up together has some pretty strong implications that I will get into when I analyse. You know what? No. There is so much I've told you guys to wait for in terms of analysis, but this moment right here is important. It is the culmination of everything that the show has been building up to. So, pack your things. We're going to the lecture hall. Those of you who saw my 500 sub celebration will know that Takagi-san 2 First Impressions Episode 12 is a video that I am very proud of. And this is why. Returning to the lecture hall made so many people happy, and it was a really fun way to end the First Impressions series. This isn't a mistake, I'm just gushing over something I did right. Alright, now that that's out of the way, let's get on to the analysis proper. One important detail that once discovered would completely alter the way I saw the second season's OP. We then get a shot of Takagi with her back to the camera. This awkward cut implies that there was a chunk of dialogue removed, which there was. Originally, the analysis was going to start talking about the bubbles. If you recall, Takagi has Nishikata's name written on her eraser, and she believes that when that eraser is used up, he will fall in love with her. I will go into the significance of this near the end of the video. There are many bad habits that I've tried to unlearn in this series of analysis videos. One of them is alluding to a point I want to make, and saving it for the end of the video. We then reached the climax of the OP, and for the record, I was under the impression that these were animated versions of some of the manga's title cards. This cowboy one is definitely a clear reference to Questions, but besides that, I cannot find any of the other images depicted in this montage. 2K55 and Grim AI pointed out that within this montage, the clip of them jumping through the air has them wearing the clothes from 100% Unrequited Love. Other than that, I still have no idea why these clips seem so familiar to me. The core premise of the show is two middle schoolers who are in love with each other but aren't emotionally mature enough to be together yet. The second season has laser focused onto this point, and proving that will be the thesis of this entire analysis series. Yeah, this is a point I kind of forgot to consider throughout much of the analysis series, but I promise it will all be tied up in the summer festival analysis. Textbook begins with Nishikata looking nervous over his bag and Takagi asking him what is wrong. Nishikata tries to play it off as though nothing is wrong, but Takagi accurately states that the reason he is acting so odd is because he has forgotten his textbook. Of all the bad habits from my first series of analysis videos, this is the one I wanted to unlearn the most. Explaining what happens in the plot without adding anything else just serves to bog down an otherwise beefy analysis. One of the many ways Takagi teases Nishikata is by withholding important information. We're going to see it this season in Valentine's Day, Arm Wrestling, Revenge, and Storage Closet. Now, just like last time, most of this video is going to be pretty light-hearted and fun, but this is one of the mistakes that I am genuinely ashamed of. This sentence is what you would call biased interpretation, or manipulating the evidence to make it seem like I'm right. In the original script, I wrote that Takagi withholding information was a common tactic in Season 2. When I thought about stories to use as examples, I realized that I was wrong. It's not a common tactic at all. In fact, I'm pretty sure Textbook is the only time that it happens. But instead of rewriting my script to be right, I instead twisted the plots of all these stories to make it seem as though I was still right. I am genuinely ashamed that I took part in this intellectual dishonesty, and I try to hold myself to a much higher standard these days. This story is a good example of Nishikata coming up with a plan to win against Takagi, but having that plan backfire. In this season, we were going to see the situation play out in hypnotism, skipping stones, appearance, April Fool's Day, forms of address, arm wrestling, bitter taste, questions, dodgeball, the eating contest in episode 7, storage closet, hide and seek, steps, and arguably souvenirs. Okay, I feel like I did better this time, but I would still remove bitter taste and dodgeball. But the first story does introduce one of 3 factors that the first episode exclusively focuses on. The first episode has a lot of points to be made. I know boiling down a story to its core themes is kind of what I do here, but to claim that nothing else exists is a little reductionist. If you can hold my hand, you win. Who would have guessed that this one line would be foreshadowing the entire character arc that Nishikata would slowly but surely go through over the course of this season? While this isn't a mistake per se, I would probably reword this to say it was the beginning of Nishikata's arc, as opposed to foreshadowing. So now we skip ahead to when Nishikata botches his first throw. At this stage, I was still kind of worried about my new form of analysis, wherein I would skip parts of the story that weren't that important. As the series went on, I became far less apologetic and just went with the fact that I was only analysing parts of the story that were interesting. The moment Takagi sees the crab at face value is there to explain why Takagi is distracted for what happens next. However, the fact that Nishikata stops himself from looking over makes me wonder if this story is even more full of foreshadowing than I had thought. I mean, what other part of the show does Nishikata miss out on seeing something cool with Takagi because he is given into one of his most common character flaws? Who knows? I'm really proud of this point. There's no mistake here, I'm just gushing again. You may argue that the only reason his reflexes reach out for her is that it's his fault she's falling in the first place, and I don't have anything more than anecdotal evidence to disprove that. I just don't think it's the case. How about the fact that we can hear Nishikata's thoughts and we don't hear any thoughts about this situation? Or the fact that the time between Takagi falling and Nishikata catching her would have been so short that there's no way he could have possibly thought about why Takagi was falling in the first place. You know, I try to avoid the just my opinion qualifier in my work because I respect you guys enough to know that you will infer that most of this is my opinion without me having to say it, but sometimes I do still slip into that mentality even if I don't use those exact words. What he did at the lake could be interpreted as a sign of affection. It's more likely that the incident made Takagi realize how much Nishikata cares for her on an instinctual level. And yeah, knowing that someone will fall into a river in your place will give anyone a bit of a shock, I imagine. A huge thanks to Orion Tran, my very first patron. Sorry, Orion Tran. A question that gets addressed far less often than whether these two like each other is whether Nishikata understands that Takagi likes him. I believe this question is the ultimate point of 2 stories this season. Oh god, what is that other picture of? Why didn't I write it down? What analysis is missing a point because I forgot to make it? No. I did a little reading on how Valentine's Day works in Japan, and I'm going to take a moment to explain it here. I'll leave my source in the description, and if you'd rather skip all this, I'll leave a time code below. I knew I forgot something! In this interaction, Takagi tells Mano that she had left her chocolate in Nishikata's locker. Now what's interesting here is that in the anime, they censor this admission with passerby chatter. They censor it in the sub, but not the dub. It's actually pretty jarring. He insists that he is very happy to have received this chocolate. This section of the story ends with Mano storming off. Another awkward cut brought to you by removing a chunk of dialogue for the outtake reel. This moment, intentionally or not, sets up a nice contrast to a similar scene during Summer Festival, but we will discuss that when we get to that particular analysis. Only 25 stories left until we get there. And now it's going to be the very next analysis video. How time flies. And it goes on to confirm to her that all the time she is spending with Nishikata is paying off. That is some mighty poor wording on my part. Hanging out with Nishikata for Takagi is a reward in and of itself. The mind game she is putting him through is what is paying off. And if I weren't as motivated, I might have been worried about my entire state burning to the freaking ground. If only I knew the situation would get so much worse, or that we would go directly from fires to flooding in a matter of days. Honestly though, I was extremely lucky. I was never in any direct danger, I didn't lose any family or property, and besides all the smoke in the air, I didn't really have to deal with the fires at all. This is at least the second time that Nishikata's friends have been used to further contextualize Nishikata. Second time in season 2, at least the third in the entire series. I still stand by the fact that Takagi could have embarrassed Nishikata in front of Nakai very easily in Waterside, and her refusal to do so says a lot about how she views her teasing of him. I don't get why I didn't elaborate on that point. Explain that Takagi's teasing of Nishikata is still a private pleasure and something she doesn't want to spread in a way she can't control. Overconfidence in his own skills. Off the top of my head, Takagi takes advantage of this in Empty Can and arguably Kickover. Nah, not Kickover. Kickover is more about Takagi withholding information and putting ideas into Nishikata's head, not so much about using his arrogance against him. Unfortunately, there are so many mistakes to go over that I can't do them all in 1 week, so join us next week when we finish correcting all the mistakes. In the meantime, I'd like to thank my patrons, Orion Tran, Quincy Chamberlain, Lars Espen, Data52, and Jaman5. If you would like to join these wonderful people or the fine folks on the Discord server, you can do so via links in the description. There won't be any outtakes for this video, but there will be for the next video. Thank you all very much for watching, and I will see you next time.